Okie dokie. I believe we are live. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining, and welcome to the Build with Me or Build with AI session. My name is Michael Todd. For anyone I haven't met before, this is actually my first Dev Day India session, so I'm very excited to be here and share with you. I am part of our solutions consulting team in APJ. So today I'm joining you live out of Singapore, and I'm very excited to be able to work together to have a look at the speed of building with the Appian platform when it comes to building a mission critical app from scratch, particularly leaning on things like Appian Composer, which James talked about this morning, as well as some newer features within our platform. As you might guess from the title slide here, our example use case today is going to be supply management for a network of Arctic research stations designed to support vital climate change research. In this scenario, we're going to be managing the delivery of some specialized equipment to these stations so they can conduct their research, manage their mission costs, and do things like track their carbon footprint while they're doing it. This is just a fun use case that I've come up with for the session today, but the same principles apply to any application that you might be building when you're working with Appian, be it in a similar case management vein or perhaps something completely different. The principles still apply. Now, of course, today in this session, the focus is on the live build, but I want to give you a little bit of context first about why this is important. If you give me 5 minutes to do slides work, we'll just set a bit of context before jumping right in and getting hands-on. So I want to cover particularly one concept which is at the core of Appian Composer and a lot of the AI capability that we have in the product, and that is modernization. The objective of this with our product is very clear, and that is we want to create the simplest path to accelerate change. I'm sure a lot of you as developers have experience firsthand in how the biggest obstacle to digital transformation and change isn't typically the technology itself. More often, it is actually the misalignment and friction between what business wants and what IT can deliver. So Appian Composer is our solution to this. This capability was released in November, like James said this morning, and it's been in a constant state of growth since. So both in terms of new features from the product, but also in terms of adoption and value that our customers have already gotten from this capability. Now, if we're honest, this is a bit of a messy process, and I know there's some overlap in slides from the keynote this morning, so I'll keep this fairly light. This process is pretty complex and messy, like I said. On the left-hand side, we have the need to get our requirements out of our legacy applications. So thankfully, this is becoming a lot easier nowadays with some things like Gen AI tools. And like James mentioned, we have partners that we can lean on to extract our requirements from legacy applications and generate the requirements that Appian Composer will ingest to create our new modern Appian app. This is a particularly crucial part of the process because we don't want to just create a like-for-like replica of our legacy systems, but we want to take the opportunity to start building better, so maybe consolidating or unifying processes wherever possible. If we take, for example, an organization that has 3 different case management solutions to service 3 different countries, maybe now is the time to consolidate that into one single system. That's not only better for the business, so maybe front-end users have a more consistent experience, but even for us as the developers, that's just 3 times less prod support and headache, right? So it's a win-win for everyone, and it's a crucial process that a lot of our customers are going through at the moment. Now, let's make this a bit more tangible, right? So this is something that our customers are actually getting real value from already. As an example, let's look at this leading Australian bank that's tackling a huge core banking modernization effort with Appian. This particular bank is rationalizing and consolidating 800 legacy FileNet apps with Appian at the core of this. With Composer, they are building new apps at a speed that they never thought possible, beating even their internal deadlines. And as a result, they have reduced their operating cost by 23%, improved response times by 44%, and are projecting a huge $6.2 million of savings just from year one of this pilot program alone. They're actually achieving all of this using both Composer, which we'll see today, as well as our Appian Doc Center, which you'll see tomorrow in a session with my colleague Deepak. So make sure to tune into that tomorrow to see some of the cool AI extraction and document processing capabilities that is helping this bank achieve these great results. Now, I know what you're probably thinking at this point, and that is, this is the live build session, right? So shouldn't we be building? How exactly do we achieve this with Composer? And I hear you. So this is the last slide, I promise. But I know from back when I was a developer in Appian, it was always really important for me to know the importance of my impact. So hopefully this helps giving a bit more context around why we are focusing on our the modernization efforts within Appian. And hopefully you can bring this forward with you to your next projects or your current projects that you're working on with Appian. So let's take a look at Appian Composer. It's always the same question at the start of the program, right? Where do we even start? We have our business users that know what sort of outcomes they want, but they don't really have an idea of how to get there. On the other hand, we have our technical team who's typically pretty hungry to start delivering the solution, but we're wanting some technical details or things like Jira stories to start executing on that solution. In this situation, neither party is going to be able to progress until we have some sort of alignment between both sides. Now, this alignment, which might have happened somewhere else beforehand in some sort of whiteboarding exercise, for example, can happen directly in Designer. And this happens in our new plan view, which you can see here and we'll be looking at today. This is where we're going to define our high-level requirements and structure for our application and have that collaboration between the business and IT before we start jumping into the application development itself. Now, enough slideware. Let's actually jump right in and have a look at how we can put together our supply management application for our Arctic research centers. Okie dokie. So what you're looking at here is something that you should all be familiar with if you've been to worked with Appian before. In our designer view, we're going to go ahead and start a new application. So we'll call it our Polar Resupply Management application. And this is our application to manage supply missions to Arctic research stations. Now, before Composer, we would start typically creating low-code objects, starting with our data structure, working our way to interfaces and so on. But now what we're greeted with is a prompt to start generating a plan for our application. So this is the new plan view that you'll have in Designer. And back when this was released, we had to just copy and paste the requirements into here. But now what we can do is actually upload files. So watch this space as we make it easier and easier for you to start providing those requirements from your legacy apps and streamlining that process to then create our application plan within Appian. So I've got a document ready to go. I've got a PDF, but you can see we've got a whole range of document types. We might be ingesting requirement spreadsheets from a business that they might have consolidated from multiple legacy apps. So we can go ahead and select that. To give you a bit of a sneak preview of what we're actually giving the system here, is quite lightweight, right? So I've specified here that we've got a resupply mission as our central record. So it's essentially case management, but we're looking at supply mission at the core of that. I've specified some key fields, some key values, as well as some related records. So we need to have the system track research stations, the transport fleet for the missions themselves, as well as things like incidents that could potentially happen to the mission along their life cycle. I've also included a couple business logic or business rule components here. So, for example, we want to set some way of tracking the carbon offset requirements for different methods of transport. If that vehicle, say, for example, uses diesel instead of solar power. Now, what I'll call out here is we can be very prescriptive with these requirements. If we wanted to give it a line-by-line breakdown of the data structure and all the different entities, we can do that. That's just more information for Composer to produce the application with. But we can also be quite minimal in our explanations, and that might help, particularly when we are talking about the reimagining of your applications, right? So we want to make sure that we're not just rebuilding our existing applications, but we're doing it in a better way. So Composer will actually start suggesting processes in your application, data structures, and other components that follow our best practices as well, to perhaps improve on your existing systems. So all we have to do here is actually just upload our document, and it will start generating that plan for us. Now, for the impatient in the room, this does take a couple of minutes. It does have to think a little bit, right, to give us some meaningful outputs. So for the purpose of today, I don't want to waste any time. So what I've done is I've actually pre-cooked, like in a cooking show, something I prepared earlier, using that exact same document that we just uploaded. This is what the Composer suggested as the application plan. So I haven't actually touched this yet. So we use this for the sake of time. Now, there's quite a lot going on in this screen, so maybe just to walk you through what to expect here is up the top, we've got some different areas that are important to an application that we want both our business and our IT to agree on. In this section, we're looking at our requirements, and this is looking at the critical functionality of our apps. And this might correspond to something during your sprint 0 that you might be whiteboarding with the team, where everyone's sort of collaborating on what is the important functionality, arranging these into the concepts of epics and user stories typically, which in this scenario translates to what we call activities up here, with all the relevant actions sitting below those activities. As we can see here, it's created a whole set of activities. So we're managing our different records, like our missions, research stations, transport fleets, as well as executing some of our business logic around our carbon offset tracking that we looked at in the document before, as well as looking at our mission capacity, for example. On the right-hand side here, you'll see that we have all along this flow in these different tabs access to our AI Copilot. So here's the first instance, I guess, of a way of us interacting with AI Copilot using that natural language interaction, where we can start making changes to this application plan that we can do still manually. So if we wanted to add activities and actions, we can do that. But instead, we can also just do it here. So maybe our business realizes that we've forgotten a crucial step and that we need to add an approval process for missions where missions that have a total spend of $10,000 or less are automatically approved. So this doesn't have to be something actually that is going to change your application plan. You can start asking our AI Copilot for suggestions or ideas, or using it just as a thought buddy during the process. But it has access to all this information that you're seeing on the screen, be it the requirements or the data model or the different personas. And it takes that all into account with our requirements that we gave it to start improving and refining and enhancing your application plan. Now you'll see that these different actions have different types here, right? So we have user actions, we have system tasks, we have interfaces to be displayed, and there's a whole raft of these available. So you'll see that we've now got a new activity here with some of these actions. So you've got some system tasks around executing this logic around low-cost missions that get auto-approved, routing missions that don't get auto-approved, and then something like an assigned activity to the approver group for those high-cost missions. What we can do here is maybe we want to rearrange these. So we can say this mission approval process logically would come after we manage our supply items or we manage our supply mission. Where did that go? Mission approval, supply mission management. So we can drag that around. But one thing that I found really cool about the new composer functionality is that it doesn't stop here with the requirements map. So what you can actually do is drill down into these activities that in my head correspond to something like a Jira story or an agile ticket item that we can start addressing as a team. So this might look familiar to a lot of you. Here we have the essentially ticket for create mission, supply mission. We can see we've got a description, which we'll come back to. We've got a persona as well, so we can start understanding as a business and IT team who is doing what activities, and we can start building in things like security and role-based access control from the get-go. Obviously, these are very important foundations for an application, so we want to do that from the start. Here you can see the system's actually generated a user story formatted in the typical best practices way that we would recommend formatting our stories, including things like acceptance criteria, which here you can see are pretty prescriptive, and those aren't things that we provided in our requirements that we uploaded, right? So Appian Composer, sorry, is helping us to fill in the gaps and make sure that what we create is a really robust, comprehensive application, and taking out a lot of that manual work that we would be doing ourselves. Another important feature here that I would call out is this area for objects down the bottom. Now, this is admittedly something more for the IT users as opposed to the business users, but it's actually very important when we are dealing with an environment that has existing apps already. So part of the benefit of using Appian and a low-code platform is the scalability that you can have in reusing objects from different applications, right? So here, if we wanted to leverage existing objects, so say, for example, we already had a mission coordinator group from a different application that we want to leverage, we could go ahead and add that to our application, which will physically add that object to our application, but also track that here. So as a technical team, we can start ideating on our solution design before we actually go ahead and developing the stories. The final thing that I'll call out in this requirement section that I find is a huge win is this export to CSV option. So when we do these whiteboarding exercises, personally with Appian's custom success, we would do that in a digital whiteboard. And then we would have to spend, well, one unlucky person got the task of taking all those requirements and trying to put them into Jira to create Jira stories so we can actually start our DevOps cycle and start our sprints. This is something now that is exported out of the box into a format that Jira understands. That's a spreadsheet that has your epic line items, your user story items, with all the detail that you just saw at that previous view when we drilled down. So that's something you can just dump into Jira right away, and we're actually good to go and start getting that much closer to development. That's probably something that I'd call out when we're making that comparison, like James made in the keynote today about vibe coding versus, I guess, this approach to AI-assisted development, is that we don't want to just abandon our existing structure and control that we have around generating our apps. This is a very different approach, but we want to still have that rigor and those processes like working well with Jira or an equivalent. We just want to make it as easy as possible. So it's a case of just reviewing and refining, and with one click exporting all those details into something like Jira. So let's have a look quickly at some of our other components of this application plan. So a lot of these concepts map to what will become our Appian objects. So you can imagine that our Appian personas will be agreed on with the business, and these will map to groups. We've got our high-level process for the application. I would call out here that this would not map directly to one process model, as this is more a representation of the entire workflow conceptually for the application. So here you can see we've got the mission being created. is going through those compliance checks. We're doing that approval step on whether the cost is under $10,000 or not, which has been added not just to the requirements, but to this process, as you can see. And then actually executing the mission at the end. So this is more about having agreement between the business and IT on things like who is doing what activity. So maybe we have the station manager is the one creating the supply mission. But realistically, we're going to create individual process models to execute this. Next, we have our screens. So here, Compose is actually going to help kickstart us by creating some of the screens that we need for this application. So right at the gates, you can start configuring things like styling to make this consistent UX. So maybe you're going to start specifying your branding, your colors, your logo that you're going to use. Maybe for the sake of argument, we'll change our buttons to be semi-rounded for a more modern look across the board. But also you can start configuring your screens without going into our low-code configuration mode. So here we have a dashboard that it's suggested for us. So this might be something like a landing page for our mission commanders. So here we can start going through and saying maybe some things aren't relevant. Maybe we don't need an alerts section here. So we can actually deselect that and not display it. We can start controlling things like labels. So maybe we want to call this a landing page as opposed to a dashboard. But the cool thing here is that this is actually starting to connect in with the data model that you're going to be creating with Composer. So we're not just hard coding a screen that you then have to replace with all your wiring for your data. We can actually go and look in this record list displaying the missions. And it's pulling the table information from the data model that we'll see in just a second. So we could instead select the record list for an incident record and then specify the columns that are being suggested in that data model directly. So this is going to generate an interface that's actually wired into our data model already. It's not just, I guess, smoke and mirrors and some hard-coded values for the sake of demo. Let's say we're happy with our dashboard. We'll have a quick look at our business rules. These are, I guess, a business interpretable way of looking at what we'll have in our expression rules. So here you can see we've got calculating the total mission cost. We've got some logic that the business can read, but also IoT can read and translate into expression rules. But these will map to expression rules as we generate our objects. Finally, we have our data model. So this is actually pretty sophisticated. We don't really need to spend too much time architecting our data structure. It has a pretty good attempt at it first. You can see that we have our supply mission as our main record here. Just zoom in for you. And we've got some related records like our research station, our incident record, and our supply item record. We can also go in and make any changes. So you can see that it has included the fields that we specified in our requirements doc, but we might want to go one step further and add some more custom fields or edit some of the fields that it has suggested to include, such as the metadata or anything else that the composer has decided may be relevant for a more robust data model. Maybe one thing we want to do here is, once again, we want to interact with our AI Copilot and make some changes directly to the data model. So let's say that we need a join table between the supply mission and supply item as suppliers can be used on different missions. So here we might have the concept of having a catalog of suppliers that can be distributed to different missions. It's not just a one-to-many relationship, but a many-to-many. So here you can see that we can just update that using natural language, and that will update this live. So you can see here that we've got now our supply mission, and we've got a supply mission item table, which joins to our supply item. So pretty cool to see it change right before your eyes. And like I said, this applies to any of the screens that we've seen before. We can start interacting with our Copilot to spend less time fiddling around doing it manually and just getting the Copilot to do it with natural language. I'll just keep an eye on the time. That's essentially what we've got in terms of our plan, right? So hopefully at this point, in real life, it might take a bit longer, but we've reached some agreement between business and IT. So we've agreed on all these components. We're all on the same page. As a development team, now we can really kickstart our development. So we'll go ahead and generate objects from this application plan. We'll generate our groups from our personas. We'll generate separate process models based on our key activities in the application. We will generate interfaces that we saw in this screen section before, as well as a site to house them. We'll generate some expression rules to house the business rules and logic that we saw. And finally, we'll also create the data structure. So here's what you're probably familiar with our record types. You can see all the relationships that have been built from that data model that we saw before. So here you can see we have our supply mission item, and supply item that we've just made changes to before. After we review that with a bit of security, of course, as per usual, we'll go ahead and generate that. So once again, this is a process that does take a couple minutes. So I have once again prepared something a bit earlier that is the objects that have been created out of this same application plan. So I'll switch across to there. And this is essentially the output. Once we've waited for those objects to load, we would come into our build view here. And you're going to see that your application already has a whole raft of low-code objects that have been generated. All of this, if you think about it, really what we've done so far, we've provided some requirements in the form of a document or free text if you want. We've made some tweaks to maybe add some requirements or flows in the process, maybe some changes to the data model. But essentially all we've done is sort of reviewed, tweaked, and then approved those changes. And you can see we've already got a whole set of artifacts or low-code objects. Now, what I want to do for the next, say, 15 minutes or so is show you how we can then continue building very or automatically using the systems and the new features that we have. So I'm going to do that from one of our record types for the mission itself. Before we go into that record type object, I want to shout out just another cool feature that we have in Appian if we were tackling this modernization in a slightly different way. Here we were taking the example where we have an existing, we're building a new data structure. So we generated all of those record types and we've created those tables and we've created the record types. In a lot of modernization applications, we already have our existing systems and the existing databases that they are using. So there's not really a need to create a new database and all the entities and the structure. We might just be reusing what they already have and redesigning the front end as opposed to doing some sort of migration to make the data behind the scenes more efficient as well. So that's something now that's super easy with Appian, and a lot of our customers have actually asked to have that. Previously, when we created a new record type, we could point it at one of our connected data sources and then automatically pull the fields and create our record type on an individual record type basis. Now what we have is this option to generate multiple record types at once. So we have all our data sources that this environment is connected to. We can go to our out-of-the-box Appian schema in this case, and it's going to look at your existing database, which might be an external system. So we might be looking at one of your legacy systems databases that we've connected to. And it'll give you all the database entities that we can create record types from. If we wanted to, we could go ahead and select everything if that's all relevant. Otherwise, maybe we want to go through and just select a subset, a subset of records. And that's really all you need to do to start creating these record types. You'll notice here that it says we are going to start adding relationships to these record types based on our foreign keys. So these aren't just going to be record types that sit in silo. We're going to start creating our data fabric using these foreign key relationships that we understand from the database structure. To prove that to you, you can see these tables that we're pulling. We're looking at some sensor devices that maybe these stations are using. And if I click into one of these records, you'll see that we have pulled not only the structure of that table and mapped it to our record type fields, which you can edit here at any point. We're also pulling through these relationships. So we've got a related record on sensor readings or sensor incidents. And these will correspond then to relationships in your record type. So we're going to have, with a few clicks, if I went back, I would just click next and confirm once more our security. And that would then go ahead and create these 7 records and handle all the relationships between them. So in the matter of a few clicks, we can do 7 record types, we can do 50, we can do a whole database worth of record types really quickly. So this is just another way that you could approach the modernization, like the start of a project where you're trying to modernize. And I think this is going to be something that's really useful to a lot of you. So just keep that in mind rather than going through and creating record types individually. This is there now in the product. We have already created our record types, though, so we will not take that approach. Instead, what I want to show you is continuing this train of thought from Composer. So we're going to have a look at our core record type here, which is our mission record type. You can see that most of the work has been done already for us, right? So we have all of our fields from Composer, the relationships set up. We can see that the database entity has been created. But everything that we're doing with our record types is to try to keep us outside of that database view as much as possible. So whatever we can do within Appian Designer as opposed to the database view is the better. So let's, for example, take a look at that requirement to calculate the total cost for a mission based on all the mission supply items that have been added to that mission. So each of these supply items has a cost. What we want to do is aggregate that at the mission level to come up with our total cost. We don't have to do this as a new record, as a new field in our database, but we can actually set up what we call a custom record field in Appian. This is a synced record. We have access to all this data very quickly with our data service. So we can create this sort of virtualized field, something like you would do with a view in the database. But once again, we don't need to go into the database to do that, and we can create that within Appian itself. So we have a few options for that calculation. We want to aggregate our related fields. And here we're going to look at our mission supply item related field and look at the unit cost of each of those line items. We're not just going to count how many supply items there are, but we actually want to sum that unit cost against all of our related records. And here you can see with the sample data that it's produced, that's been produced by Composer as well, we have each of our missions with its reference number, and you can see it is calculating the total cost based on whatever mission supply item records are related. So here we don't have any related records, whereas here we're getting $1.2 thousand already. You can configure obviously the names, but for the sake of time, we'll speed through that. What I want to show you now is the ability to use AI again to speed up our development in something that is not necessarily development focused, but I know something I spent a lot of time in, a lot of time doing on projects was getting ready for sprint showcases or sprint reviews, where to showcase what you've built and spent a lot of effort building and you're very proud of, you want to have some realistic test data in there in your system, right? So that's something that typically we'll just add manually and start thinking of what are some realistic test cases. We can actually now use AI Copilot to generate that data for us. All we need to do is say what records we want to generate the data for. So obviously we're in the mission record, but we can also generate for the related records of incident and mission supply items all at the same time. And what you're going to see is this is going to understand the context of our record, all the different fields that we've got, and as well as any details that you might have put into the field description fields to generate some realistic data for you. We'll see this think for a second. Before suggesting some results, we can choose whether we want 10 or 25 or 50 records, as well as what fields we want to actually be included in that sample data generation for us. Now, I might once again add some context in our AI Copilot window. You're probably sensing a theme here of having this assistant on the right to use natural language. But we might say that these are missions to resupply our Arctic research stations. You can see here that it had some like earthquake prone regions. This might not have gotten the context basically that we were looking at Arctic regions, as that's something that's provided in the record type itself. So we can refine that here. And as James called out earlier in the keynote, we are looking to embed more and more of the context of Composer into our design objects. So whether that be something like our record type here to give all that context from our plan to this data generation, or whether that be something like in our interfaces to have the context when we're using something like a Copilot to code our interfaces. That's definitely something to look out for as the product evolves. So you can see here we've got some updated information. We've got some relevant Arctic related data and reference numbers as well that it's added. So we can go ahead and insert that. What we'll do now as well is there's a whole heap of automated activities that the record type will start generating for us. So the first of those is what we call record events. This is used to help with our auditing in the system. So every project that I've ever been on has had requirements to audit activity in the system. Maybe not something that business calls out in the user stories, but it's inevitably something we have to do. So the record types are going to handle that automatically for us. We just have to tell the system what type of events to look out for. So, for example, a mission can be created, updated, commented on, and then we can just add some other levels of granularity in terms of different types of actions that we can take on this record. So maybe a mission can be approved. Someone approved the mission, someone rejected the mission. We can just very quickly type those different options here. And I would encourage you to be quite granular here if you can, because what happens with these record events is it not only helps with the audit history on your record, but it directly ties to the process insights capability or process mining capability that we have in our process HQ. Some of you might have seen that before, but essentially we can start getting insights on how our processes are running. And the key events in our process mining diagram that you'll see and the analysis that happens are based on these record events. So the more detail you have here, the more insights that we'll have about how our process is running and maybe some efficiencies that we can gain in making changes to our process at certain event milestones of that record. I'll hit generate now. Appian will take care of the rest. So it'll handle creation of all these different record types that we need to support this structure. It'll populate the event type lookup with all the event types that we just specified. We just had to do maybe say 3 or 4 clicks to confirm what we wanted, and then that's set up and good to go. We also have the ability to similarly generate actions from our record type. So we can do that manually, of course. We always have that option. We're not going to take that away. But out of the box, we can create our CRUD actions to create, update, and delete. And similarly to the data generation, all you have to select here is what related records you might want to include on your interfaces when you are creating or updating these forms. So maybe when you're creating a mission, it also makes sense to include the mission supply line items because those otherwise we'd have to create those separately and link them. So maybe we can include the supply items, but incidents we can leave as a separate action that might get raised separately in the system. Now, this is something new in the system where it's actually going to give you some options for the look and feel of this experience. So if you're lazy like me, you might just take the recommended template that AI Copilot is suggesting to you. But basically, it's choosing from the options and it's understanding all the different number of fields, type of fields you're looking at, suggesting a wizard versus a single step form based on how many related records you are using. So here you can say I could I could put it all into a single step form if I wanted to, but it is suggesting a wizard form to make this a good user experience based on our best practices and experiences with customers. So I'm going to trust it and just go ahead and generate those record actions. So what you'll see is very quickly that has created our actions. So if we take, for example, the new mission action, we'll see that it's created the underlying process, which is a shared process for creating and updating. And it also now shows the start form within that process. So it's created the interface, the one that was suggested just before. And before a more recent update, we had to click into our process model to actually go in and open that node for the start form and then open the interface. So we've just made that a bit easier for you now, and you can just access that interface directly here. Okay, so now we've got our sample data, we've got our audit functionality or our events, we've got our actions. We can also go ahead and let the record type generate our summary view. All I do once again is select what data I want to appear. So the mission data is obviously pretty crucial. I once again want my related mission supply item data to appear. And I might leave it at that at the moment, otherwise this screen might get a little bit too bogged down. We confirm our namings, and then we let the system generate that for us. So as you can see, it's still taking into account all of our security and the, I guess, robust details that we need for a production level application. But it's gone ahead already and created that summary view for us. I'll give that a save. And what I'll look at now is our list view, so we can start getting a taste of all the things that have just been generated by the record type. So maybe even if I drop back into our designer view, you can see all of these objects that have just been created directly from our record type. So we didn't have to create any new process models or interfaces or record types manually. This is something that has just been generated automatically, similarly to how Composer generated all those objects for us. So sort of turbocharged development here, where we're not losing control, but we get to choose the final outcome, do some tweaking, some reviewing if necessary, but really speed up that development process. So let's get a little preview of what this looks like, right? So you guys might be familiar with this list view using our old view in Tempo, which lets us, I guess, preview the record data and some of the actions we can take. So if I click into this record list, we've got our missions here. We can see the data that's been suggested by, or that's been generated from our sample data generation. And we can see all the different columns here. So we've got our reference number, the status of the mission, delivery deadline. And you might notice that it actually does a much better job than it used to in terms of the default look and feel of this record list. So it'll start suggesting things like rich text fields or icons for Boolean fields, for example, or tag fields where appropriate. But it'll still default to showing all of our fields here, which we might want to refine in the next step. We've also got access to our search, our filters out of the box, actions to create a new mission, as well as the summary view of our individual records already. So you can see that this is the screen that was generated when we created the view. It's got all our mission details here. Once again, we've got some nicer formatting in there, so you don't have to spend too much time tweaking this. It's understood that the objective field, for example, is a long text field that is in a paragraph format. So it's actually known to split that out for us. And then we've got the related records listed as a table here. So in this case, there's just one, but there might be 5 supply items that would be listed here for ease of reference. If we wanted to, we've got access to our actions already. So you can see this has pulled up that wizard format that was suggested to us before. Maybe we want to go ahead and change the status to in progress, change some details of our objective, and just make some general changes to our mission here. As you can see, that's updated. So the status is updated to in progress. And I guess what I'd call out here is that without really doing any development, as we'd classically think about it, we have got a pretty functional application as it is, right? So we've got our core records, we've got our record list. A lot of our requirements around reporting typically can be achieved through our search functionality and our out-of-the-box filters. So if we wanted to set up some filtering, we can use our out-of-the-box export to Excel to start handling those reporting requirements. And then as a user, we can start managing our records, right? So we want to create new missions to support these Arctic research centers. Maybe we want to update existing missions to progress them and track that something has been delivered on time, for example. But a vast majority of your functionality is here ready to go. So business is happy. They're good to go faster than expected, and we're happy because it's less work required for us as a developer to get this out and functional. Obviously, we might want to do some tweaking, right? We want to make some changes to the look and feel, change these fields to not be camel case labels, for example. But those are very quick changes that we can make, and instead focus on, I guess, the more interesting parts of the build than these repetitive processes that can and have been automated as part of the product. Okay, so let's, I guess, do the final tying up of coming out of this tempo view and actually looking to create a site that our business users can interact with. So let me close this and go back into our generated objects, and we'll look for our site objects. So we didn't actually manually create a site object, but here is what Composer generated for us based on what we had in that screen section of the application plan. This might look familiar. This is what we saw before. So we have our mission command center with some alerts and tasks and a mission here. So I guess the point to call out here is we've got Composer creating the underlying interfaces, but it's also creating the site itself to house these interfaces so that it's already there, ready to go. So if I opened up this web address, as a business user, I can actually start accessing this already. Maybe we want to get our dev team to sign off on it first, but this is actually all the structure is there, ready to go. We just need to tweak it to make it look and feel and behave how we want it to behave. A couple improvements, I guess I'd call out recently to our sites is that now, like our other low-code objects, we have versions on sites. So this is something we didn't have before, but in case someone else comes in and plays some silly things and makes some silly changes to your site, one, you can tell who that is usually, and then now you can actually revert your versions. So you can maybe in prod roll back some features if they are causing issues. We've also got things like a new style for the layout of our site. We have got the ability now to directly embed Process HQ into your sites. So you can see here reports and dashboards. The type of field that we're bringing in or type of content that we're bringing in is Process HQ. In this case, the full library, but we can choose to bring in just a dashboard. So what this means is that Process HQ no longer sits as like a siloed site that you have to navigate through this waffle icon. But instead, you can actually have it as one of the pages in your site instead and have direct access to it. So at one click, you can go start accessing dashboards that you've created or other people have created and shared with you. I'd also shout out that not on our site object, but on our portal object, which is what we use for public-facing use cases, we now, out of the box, have the ability to integrate with external user tracking services. So maybe something like Google Analytics. That's something that our customers have been asking for a while, like so they can track public user engagement with their portal forms, for example, and track how far someone has gotten through a form. So we can now, out of the box, just hook up to your existing services with something like a Google Analytics, and that will be available just in your configuration of your portal object. So let's maybe make a few tweaks here. So we've got our underlying interface, but we want to maybe make a couple changes before we hand this over to the business to start using. You'll recognize this now. We're in the interface design view for this interface object. At the moment, the AI Copilot here is just what has been around for a little while now of uploading a PDF and creating a new interface from a PDF. As James alluded to this morning, watch this space, particularly at the next Appian Around the World events or the DevCon, because we are doing a lot of work here in terms of upgrades to the AI Copilot functionality, so we can do things like bring in our requirements from Composer and start using natural language to develop our user interfaces. So I'm very excited about that. I'm sure you are as well. Maybe here what I'll do is we have our active missions, and this is where I'll point out that this isn't just hard-coded values, but the interface that was out of the box generated by Composer is actually hooked up to the record type that was generated by Composer as well. So it's created a record, a grid using that supply mission record. But I've actually just made some changes to that. Let's say I want to hook it up to the PMM mission record instead. Sorry, it didn't like that. Let me refresh this. I've recently made some changes to the record list, so I want to replace that with a new record list of my PMM record type. So I'll go ahead and collapse that label, add my PMM mission record, which will pre-populate it with that list that we have in our record type that we saw before in tempo. So that's all displayed here. Realistically, we would trim this down, but I won't waste your time today, given our short amount of time. But maybe we'll say that we have initial sort on the ID field, the mission ID, so that we only have the latest missions. And maybe we just want to display 5 rows of data at once. Now, there have been a few cool tweaks that I think as developers you'll appreciate in our interface designer. The one I'm nerding out about currently is this tabs component. So you'll see here, I can just drag and drop a tab component and start managing that dynamic display behavior that typically I would have built manually before using cards, but it is something that I have to spend a lot of time building to make it look good and functional. But now this is something that you have out of the box. So you can see I have tab 1 for my missions. And if I go to tab 2, I could add a separate grid of, say, for example, our incident data that we have as a related record to our missions. So let me go in and add our incident data here. Maybe once again, we'll just limit that to 5 rows per page. And then let's just configure our tabs so we know what we're looking at here. So instead of tab 1, we'll call these missions. And instead of tab 2, we'll call these incidents. And maybe instead of missions, we'll call active work to make it a bit more agnostic here. Maybe one more final thing I want to do is add some tweaks to our actions. So I can maybe duplicate this record action field, and instead of a new supply mission, maybe we want to change this to our incident record and let the user also create a new incident directly from the dashboard itself. Oh, actually, I haven't generated those actions, so no, we won't do that. So I'll just remove that action then. And obviously, this would be a slightly more involved process, realistically, right? Like working out what exactly the business wants to see on this page, but all the structure is there for you. You just need to make the changes now to tweak the layout, the content, maybe the actions that you're giving access to, the different columns, and the way the business wants that information displayed. But once you're happy with that, we can just save that directly. The site is existing already. So if we give a refresh to our front-end experience for our business users, you can see that we have our changes reflected here in the workspace. So I've got my active work, I've got visibility of my tasks and alerts, my actions here, as well as my tabs that I was very happy to see released as part of the product. You can see it's a nice clean experience that didn't take me any time at all. One thing also I didn't call out in terms of a new component is we have a Boolean checkbox now, which we had a workaround previously where we would use radio buttons or checkbox components and have to do some funky save into logic that would make it work like a Boolean. But now you can actually just do this out of the box for any Boolean field. So something like terms and conditions or just flagging something as a flag on the record. You've got this Boolean checkbox as well. So there's a few new components in there that make even just the low-code development, not focused on the AI side right now, but just our typical low-code development style. That's still something that we continue to build on, and yeah, just a shout out to keep an eye out for those efficiencies you can get in there as well. So I guess let's have a bit of a stock take of where we are in the process here. So about 50 minutes ago, we had our requirements document that had our specifications on a supply management use case for our Arctic research centers. With that, we got an application map that the business and the IT users could all agree on. So those are typically our Sprint Zero activities where we might be doing that outside of Appian. We can now centralize that to within Appian itself and make sure that we're covering all of our bases with our different components of an application, everything functionality-wise through to role-based access, data requirements, processes, and screens. We can start collaborating and agreeing as a team on what that should look like. Then it shifts to more of a developer mindset, and I'm, as a developer, very happy to be able to export everything that we've worked on together and agreed upon into something like Jira, kick off our user stories, start setting up our sprints in Jira if we're still using that. And then also let Composer start generating our application for us. So it's going to create our interface objects, our groups, our expression rules, our data structure as well. All of that automatically, with us just reviewing things like whether we want to leverage existing objects or create new objects, change the naming or the security. Otherwise, all of that generation is handled for us. We then have our automation that we have through the record types themselves. So we had our core mission record that we went into and we made some changes. We added a custom field to do some create a virtualized field, doing some custom calculation logic in our data fabric. Before handling things like our out-of-the-box summary views, we've got our actions, and as well as our audit. So you can see this has all been automatically captured in our site, and it's all fully functional, right? This isn't smoke and mirrors, so we can start doing things like adding comments here and saying this needs to be finalized by next week, and posting that. And we can do things like subscribe or manage people that are active subscribers on this case, so people know to keep an eye out for it, or actually workflow our case through its mission lifecycle. So from our record type, we created our audit, we created our actions, our views, and our record list. And then finally, we got the existing objects from Composer for our interfaces and our site objects. That was sort of the plumbing to put this all together. And we can make some final tweaks to that. Otherwise, it's all ready to go. And that's what you're seeing here. So I hope you can appreciate now how, I guess, quick it is, or like turbocharged this development process is. This is just me as one person as well, also going a bit slower so that we're not going at too much of a whiplash speed for you all on the call today. But I hope you're excited to get your hands on it. This is something that you can get your hands on, like James mentioned in the keynote session this morning. You can all access Composer and all this functionality that you saw today in our community edition. So please, 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 I would encourage you to try this out for yourselves and see that this is some really exciting stuff coming. And I hope you get to try it on a project that you're working on currently or coming up soon. So thank you very much for the time today. Just a reminder to please tune in for tomorrow's content. Like I shouted out, there's some cool content about Doc Center from my colleague Deepak. And yeah, thank you for having me at the Dev Day event today. I've really enjoyed it.